And with the proper training, talking about programs like this, the two companion programs in the climate curriculum, one of them is for supervisors and union people called Leading the Change. Another one is for people who want to maintain this process in the workplace on a day-to-day basis called Sustaining the Climate. There are other training initiatives that are equally valuable. The Covey programs that your education organization brings here periodically. We have the Colors program. Rhonda, help me out here. What are some of the other training initiatives?
Everybody knows we have Rosetta, the leadership management programs.
Okay. All of these resources, all these learning resources, when you understand those differences and when you've had the proper training and regular practical work, all three of those words are critical. I'm going to come back to them in a minute. Employees across this organization will, doesn't say might, doesn't say should, doesn't say maybe really ought to want. It says will, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Begin to affect positively the frameworks of assumptions and therefore the climate of their work groups and their facilities, and ultimately the whole system. Now, I want to go back, and I want to talk about these three magic words here. Regular, practical, work. Each one of those is important in its own way. If this day is not to be a waste for you, it has to take root in your everyday life. It has to be a regular part of what you do and how you communicate with one another. This model, this open hand technique, cannot be effective if you decide, okay, every third Wednesday between 3 and 3:30, I'm going to do that. Wrong. Not going to help you. You've wasted your day. This has to be the way you do business. Every conversation, every day, on the job, off the job. It has to be your modus operandi, your way of doing business. Otherwise, it's useless. Secondly, practical. It does you no good to play status cafe, no matter how many Michelles you find who will stand up there and do that. It doesn't do you any good to play this status cafe or to put this in another context. If you're going to help make your climate better, if you're going to use this technique, it has to be applied to the practical challenges and problems and stressful situations that you face day after day after day, on the job and off. And thirdly, work. Make no mistake about this. This takes effort. This takes work. Sherry and I sort of got into this a little while ago. How much effort, people sometimes will ask, how much work should I be willing to put into this? Well, you know what? I can't answer that. Each of us has to answer that question ourselves. But the real question you should ask yourself is, how much is it worth to me to have a better working environment? Because the answer to that question will tell you how much effort it's worth putting into this. The more valuable you perceive a positive work environment to be, the more effort you will be willing to put in to make that happen. And remember, ultimately, this is not about changing anybody else. We are not about trying to transform or hammer into a different shape the Barrys of the world. I can't do that. All I can do is create a safe communicating environment for myself. All I can do is determine that every time I deal with any person, day or night, on or off the job, I am going to deal with that person on an equal high status level. I am going to be safe. I am going to be calm and clear. I'm going to give the person a set of 3. I will ask back and listen to them with 2 eyes and 2 ears. And I will make every attempt to close that transaction positively with some kind of a handshake. That's all I can do. And that's what I must do if I'm going to make a change in my environment. Once we make that commitment, we can begin to make it happen. Until we make that commitment, nothing will ever change. Now, it isn't often that I have an opportunity to do what I can do now, and that is to tell you with certainty that if you do this, it will make a change in your climate. We've been doing this program, as I told you earlier, this is the 168th presentation over a course of 4 or 5 years in various medical centers throughout the country. Because we've got that kind of history, we are now starting to get back some very amazing success stories. Things that have happened when people have taken this model to heart, made the commitment, and actually started putting it into practice. I will share with you only 3 stories. Story number 1. Central Iowa, one of the early programs we did in Network 23. There was a supervisor who came to that session and had with her in the room, there were probably 35 or 40 people in the session. But this supervisor came, and part of the group included 3 or 4 of her immediate subordinates. When we got into the discussion of Chuck and Barry, and we were talking about the Barrys of the world, this supervisor had an epiphany right in the middle of the session. And at one point she blurted out, "Oh my God, I'm Barry." And 3 or 4 of her subordinates said, "Yes, yes you are." She had a turning point to make. She had a decision to make at that moment, and she made it. The very next morning, she called a meeting of all her work group. And she told them very, very bluntly, "I had a wake-up call yesterday. I got my eyes open to some things that I had refused to see or couldn't see before. So here's what I'm going to propose. Those of you who haven't been to this program yet, I'm going to make it available to you. I am not going to require you to go, but I will make it available if you want to go. And once everybody has been that wants to go, I want us to sit down and talk about it." So they did. In the succeeding sessions, all of her other subordinates went, and when the last one finished, they sat down and had a meeting. And they decided as a group that this was how they were going to do business from that day forward. That they were going to have a safe environment in their work group, that they were going to speak to each other calmly and clearly, make it a practice to give people 3 reasons, explanations, whatever, listen with 2 eyes and 2 ears, and always close with a handshake. Now this was a work group that was well known in the medical center, but not for good reasons. This group had the highest turnover in the medical center. They had EEO complaints, they had union grievances, their absenteeism was terrible, there were constant interventions from HR until the day they made this decision. Within 6 months of that day, they had completely turned around. There had not been one turnover. Nobody had left. Their absenteeism went to at or near 0. There had been no EEO complaints, no union grievances. HR wondered if they had gone out of business. It got to the point where the director of the medical center called the supervisor and said, "Stop by and see me." And when she came in, he said to her, "What's going on down there? You got those people locked, chained to the wall or what?" And she told him what happened. He said, "Keep on doing it." A couple of months later, she got promoted. She was assigned to another work unit in another facility. And then 2 magical things happened. She went to the new unit, and day 1, she sat down with all of them. She said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, your new supervisor. I want to tell you a little story." She told them the story of her previous unit and what they had done, made them the same offer, made the training available to them. They agreed as a group that that's how they were going to operate, and they began the process in that group. Meanwhile, her replacement comes in, sits down with this group and says, "I've heard of these people. What's going on here?" So they told him. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to go to the training." So he went, he came back and said, "Works for me. Let's keep it going." So now you got 2 work groups. 2. Okay? That's the kind of thing that can happen. That's number 1 story. Here's number 2. A session in Nebraska We didn't know this until after the fact. One of the people in our session in Nebraska one day was a guy who was only in the class, and this is tragic, he was only in that session because his boss wanted him to get the hell out of the job. Wanted him to get off the job for a day. Didn't want him around. So he sent him to the class. True story. The guy was such a troublemaker that the day he attended our class, the paperwork was already being processed to terminate him. Okay? Sometime during the day, I don't know when, this guy got smacked between the eyes with something that happened in that class. The following morning, he asked for a meeting with his boss. And he sat down with the supervisor. I heard this story later. Told the supervisor, look, I realize you guys are getting ready to fire me. I know that. I know all the trouble I've caused. But I got gobsmacked yesterday in this training that you sent me to. And I'm going to tell you this. If you fire me, I get it. I understand. But I think, after what I went through yesterday, I could turn this around if I had the opportunity. You know, today, that individual is not only not terminated, he is no longer considered a problem employee. He's not anybody's ideal by any circumstance, okay? But he is no longer considered a problem employee, and his job is no longer in jeopardy. That's story number 2. Here's one of the most touching ones. We were in Asheville, North Carolina, at the Mid-Atlantic's Consolidated Patient Account Center, MACPAC. We had done a number of sessions there, and on our last day there, the director of the facility came by to see us, and he said, I got to tell you guys this story. He said, it tore me up. He said, I had a woman come into my office last night after hours who had been to your program, and she was in tears. Her eyes were brimming with tears as she said this to me. If I had had this training 6 months ago, I'd still be married. I ain't making this up. Okay? This is the kind of impact this approach can have in your life. And I say that with confidence because I've seen it happen. We're getting these cases in, we're getting these anecdotal references in all the time. You can do this. Your colleagues are doing it. They have done it. And with your help, everybody in this room can do it. You can change your work life. Okay? Something to think about. Okay, we're coming down the home stretch now.